Hi, welcome to the first lesson for Theme 8. I know it's a bit strange doing it this way, but I think with some hard work from you um, and plenty of support from me, we can make this work. This theme is called A Dangerous Place to Live. It's all about geological hazards, and really it's starting to apply what we've learned in Theme 7 to the practical applications of understanding how this active dynamic crust that we've learnt about in Theme 7 can actually have an impact on our lives. Sometimes this impact can be really very direct. Um, the quote on the front of your booklet is um, reported from a captain on a British Airways flight that happened to fly into the middle of a ash cloud from an erupting volcano in Indonesia. Um, I do like the sort of the stiff upper lip characteristics of it. Perhaps something we should all bear in mind just at the moment. Anyway, let's get stuck into this booklet. As ever, when we begin any theme, we need to think about what's in a word. So turn to the inside of the back cover of your booklet. In there, you'll find some of the key terms for this theme. These terms may be ones that you're more familiar with than some of the other themes we've done, based perhaps on some earlier work that you'll have done in geography, for example. Okay, press pause on the video now and see if you can come up with your own definitions for each of these terms. Okay, now you've got perhaps a starting point for your definitions. Let's think a little bit more about what we actually mean by a geological hazard. Now, to introduce this, I found a set of videos produced in New Zealand to look at the geohazards that are a very real part of everyday life in New Zealand. We're going to follow a virtual field trip um, through the southern island of New Zealand, looking at some of the impacts of geohazards there as we work our way through the theme. Now, this isn't in the booklet, but I think it gives a good idea about the type of issues that we're talking about. Have a watch of the video now.
Kia ora koutou, Shelley the Learn's field trip teacher here to introduce you to the geohazards virtual field trip. You'll be able to join Alvin, the Learn's ambassador, and me as we travel to the west coast of the South Island to find out more about geohazards, the hazards created by geological processes. On this field trip, you're going to particularly look at earthquakes, landslides, and tsunami. You'll be able to walk across the mighty Alpine Fault, which is actually one of the world's fastest moving land faults. It can even be seen from space. It looks pretty much like a straight line running all the way along the western edge of the Southern Alps. And our huge Southern Alps wouldn't have been created without uplift along that fault line. And with that being such a large fault, it's going to produce a large earthquake when it next ruptures. Scientists believe that on average it ruptures every 330 years. So we need to be prepared for an earthquake on this fault line. It's likely to produce a magnitude 8 earthquake, which is also going to trigger landslides. It's an earthquake that will happen on land, so it won't cause a tsunami. But offshore earthquakes could cause a tsunami on the west coast. So we're also going to explore what causes the tsunami and how to prepare for one. You'll meet experts from the University of Canterbury who will guide you on this geological tour, and you'll see how they've been researching the Alpine Fault, how they know so much about it, how often it ruptures, and why it will produce such a large earthquake. You'll also meet locals from Franz Josef. That township lies across the Alpine Fault, so people have been busy preparing for a possible earthquake. So you'll learn how you can prepare for earthquakes as well. Because in New Zealand, sitting on a plate boundary, the plate boundary between the Australian plate and Pacific plate, we know that geohazards are common, so we all have to be prepared for them. So it's going to be a relevant field trip for everyone, and it's going to be a fascinating journey to the west coast. I do hope you can join us. Sign up your ambassador so Alvin has some company on the field trip, and make sure you read the background pages so you're prepared. You can also book in for a live audio conference so you can talk to the experts during the field trip and ask your questions. I hope you can join us in Franz Josef for the Geohazards field trip. We'll see you then. Ka kite anō.
As you can see from the video, geohazards come in a wide range of different types. It's important for us as geologists to understand the processes that are behind each of these types. What are the causes? Because if we don't understand the causes, we can't really get into what we can do about it, or even predicting where they're likely to occur. The four main types of geohazard that we're going to discuss in this theme are earthquakes. Probably the most likely geohazard to cause significant damage, fatalities, and a whole host of different problems. Certainly year on year, earthquakes pose the biggest threat to us. Volcanic eruptions are nature's big show. They can be tremendously destructive of property, and they do occasionally kill people as well. Although, as we'll see, the threat from volcanic eruptions is significantly less than from earthquakes. Tsunamis have the potential to cause enormous devastation. The biggest single events that we've had to deal with in recent history have been tsunamis. We'll look at the causes and effects of tsunamis and how they can have much longer term effects than some of the other hazards we've seen. And finally, landslides. Perhaps not quite as spectacular as some of the other hazards we're going to talk about, but one that's perhaps a lot more common, and certainly one that we have to deal with the consequences of here in Wales. Let's look a little bit more at what geohazards are by following the next stage on the virtual field trip in New Zealand.
Well, kia ora everyone, and welcome to the Geohazards field trip. You're on your way from Christchurch to the west coast, and right now you're heading up to Porters Pass, and it's going to be the perfect place to have a look at what geohazards actually are and to see some evidence of them in the landscape. So we'll pop up to the pass, jump out, avoid the snow, and have a look. You've just stopped before Porters Pass, and it's a bit chilly, I'd have to say. Snow on the ground even. The pass is at over 900 metres, so I hope you've got your warm gear on. But it's a great place to stop on our geological road trip. This is Sam from the University of Canterbury, who is in the geology department. He's going to be guiding you over the next few days. Now, Sam, we're going to be looking at geohazards. What are geohazards?
So it's geological processes that are occurring in the natural environment, and the likes of earthquakes, volcanoes, landslides, tsunamis, and really looking at how those processes interact, or people that are putting themselves in exposure to those processes.
Right, so we've got the geological processes and then people that are around that can be affected by those. And specifically on this field trip, you're going to be looking at earthquakes, tsunamis and landslides, no volcanoes around here. So why do we need to be so aware of geohazards in New Zealand? Why are we at risk of them?
So New Zealand, in terms of a landscape, it's a young landscape and it's a constantly growing landscape given the tectonic environment that we've got in this area. And so we've got plates colliding, plates sliding past each other, plates going and driving underneath each other. And in those processes, there's lots of energy being released. So there's landscapes being formed, landscapes being destructed, and active processes that are going on at the same time.
So the land we're on is actually moving, which is pretty intense, and you can see examples of that movement in this environment here. You've stopped here for a reason. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we're at the Porter's Pass fault zone, and it's one of a strand of active tectonics that is occurring in New Zealand, and it partially interlinks with the larger structure that we're heading towards, the Alpine Fault, but it's how the stresses and strain of these tectonic plates are expressed at the surface. And so we're looking across at the Porter's Pass fault trace, and it's a kind of a dynamic relationship in the landscape that you can see the line running through the landscape.
And amazing to think that you can actually see the evidence of that movement, and you're going to see other examples throughout this field trip. But in the meantime, you might want to think about what geohazards exist in your area, because we're going to talk more about how you can prepare for those throughout the field trip. Hey, thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Shelley.
Okay. To finish this lesson then, we need to think about the range of geological processes that might be involved and the types of hazards that they can create. We're going to start our exploration of this next lesson by looking at earthquakes. In the meantime, you will find lots of information about this on the net, both in video form and in written form. Do a little reading around the subject, so we're ready then to talk about earthquakes next time. I'll see you then.